We continue the Shir. Sichlei Saran, Rabbi Nachman saying, Seif Vej Zayin, paragraph 207, with apologies for a case of laryngitis. Rabbi Nachman says that at times, Rabbi Nachman himself speaks to a person, to a Talmud, or to a stranger who comes to him for advice or for help. Rabbi Nachman speaks to that person, and it would be expected that the words, such holy words coming from the tzaddik emes, would take effect immediately. However, there are times when the words do not take effect immediately, but after a while, after a period of time. That period of time depends upon circumstances. But in the end, definitely, it will have the desired effect. This is comparable to a medicine. A person who is very ill, he takes his medication. Not necessarily does the medicine cure the person immediately, instantly. It could slowly work on a person until it takes effect, where it removes the illness in that person. But if the medicine is a really potent one, it will cure. So the Menachem words too are definitely helpful. They definitely can take effect upon a person's spiritual illness. They will cure eventually. Sometimes in a shorter period of time, sometimes in a longer period of time. But safe called safe. In the end, they will take effect. The person will be cured. Number two, that when we say that Rabbi Nachman speaks to a person, this means even today also. Rabbi Nachman speaks to a person, these words in the Sefer, Rabbi Nachman's sayings, are words that are spoken to each person directly. As you read these words, as you hear Rabbi Nachman's words, Rabbi Nachman's sayings, it is as though he is speaking to you. So each person listening must know that this is a medicine for himself. There's neshama, which definitely will cure his neshama, some a little later, some a little earlier. But if he takes it, if you swallow that medicine, you listen to it, you accept it, it definitely will cure you. Arizal says too, not only does it cure that person who hears it eventually, but sometimes these words revolve, they move about, they are transferred from one to the other. Lahavdil, in a disease, you have a disease that's carried from one carrier to the next, contagious disease. Lahavdil amida teva, something good is much stronger, much more effective. So lahavdil, the words of Rabbi Nachman that are so holy, they can travel from one person to the next. The person who hears these words, and reads these words, can relate these to a second person, and that person to a third one, that one to a fourth one, until these words might not be needed by the first few. There is someone who needs this type of cure, this topic in which he is very weakened, he is very ill, he needs this cure, and eventually these words get to the person who needs it, and that person receives a cure through it, through these words. But it is something that the Rabbi Nachman sent this message out. It was sent out to travel. Sometimes it's a long trip, a long journey. It goes from one to the other. It can go from one city to the next. Till it reaches its address, it comes to that person, and that person is affected by it, and completely cured. But completely cured. Rabbi Nachman said the Fedish, his words, his sayings, his sichos, his teidos, his lectures that he gave, shiurim, were given not just to the group that was with him, not just to those talmidim around him, or those who came to his table, or those who came to his shir, but they are also said clearly and explicitly for their children, children's children, for generations to come. Rabbi Nachman was able to see very clearly the entire future in front of him. Surely Rabbi Nachman could see the next generation after his Estalkus, the generation afterwards, and see how these words will be repeated, transmitted from one Talmud to the next, from one group to the next, and they were intended as such. There's a posek in the Torah which says that Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Jews, notify your children and your children's children and generations later that the Torah you're receiving at Mahar Sinai is not just for this group of Jews here, not just for that nation at that time. It's meant for the Jewish peoples of all generations to come. Same thing applies, Arizal said, for future generations also. Not just the Talmidim who surrounded him, but their children and their Talmidim and their grandchildren and so on. So that when there is a shear of Rabbi Arizal's words, it is meant in that manner. Rabbi Arizal foresaw there would be a shear in the second and third and fourth generation. These same words, and it is as though Rabbi Arizal himself is saying those words. A person learning Rabbi Arizal's words, hearing the transmitting of those words, is getting them directly from Rabbi Arizal because they were intended for that purpose. They were intended for all future generations until and after Mashiach's coming. And it also too that after all these words were made to save a person who has fallen into depth of bitterness, depth of depression, a black abyss, a pit of desperation, of having abandoned the Torah Hashem Chas v'Shalom. It's meant to draw that person up, to bring him back, to raise, to elevate the person, bring him close to Hashem. That person is considered as though he was drowning in mud, drowning in quicksand. That person, Neshama, is dying. He's being saved, he's being hauled up. Then it also says, Da. Da means you should know, take this to heart, that if a time comes that these words are said to someone, and that person listens to these words, and he finds himself being drawn upwards, he finds himself going up, being dragged out of this quicksand, and anyone who will cling to that person will be drawn up too. That's how powerful these words are. The rope, the chain is so strong that it can pull a person up from the greatest depth, plus anyone attached to that person. So it's not just that you require a great tzadik at that time, that you require a great Talmud Chacham or a great Goin. The simplest person who listens, absorbs, accepts these words, and is drawn to them, all those close to him who are attached to that person too, also are being rescued at the same time. Therefore, we can stress so strongly the words of the Rosenfeld, something which is incredible, unbelievable, unacceptable by the world, and yet we accept it, we believe it, B'emuna Shlema, the Tachlis HaShlemus. Difficult as it is for the mind to grasp this, we accept it without question. We reaffirm our faith in these words. Rosenfeld said there are very great tzaddikim in the world. There are very great Talmidei Chacham in the world. And there are very small people in the world, practically illiterate, practically amaratzim, but simple and sincere. The greatest tzaddikim in the world who are not mikusher to the tzaddik emes, they are not the tzaddikim amitim of that generation. True tzaddikim in that generation are those who are truly, sincerely mikusher to the tzaddik emes. So when a person says, "Who am I?" I'm nothing. Look at these great Talmidei Chachamim, geniuses, Iluyim, Ge'inim, walking around. They're so well versed in all the different corners, the far recesses of the Torah Kedusha. How can I ever compare to them? And yet, if this person is mikusher to the tzaddik emes, The fact is that he is better off. He is better off because he is literally part of that tzadik emes. And that will answer the question too. Powerful question. How come there are such great tzaddikim in the world? So pure, so refined, so perfect, such great lamdim, who devote their time not to foolish items brought on the table, but they spend their whole days and nights immersed in the study of Torah and Tefillah. How come they do not get to Rabbeinu Zalsian? How come such simpletons, say simpletons, really schlubs like us, who are we, what are we compared to some of the great gedolim of our time too? You see by the Rosh Yeshivas, the Einim today, really deep London, we know nothing compared to them. Why should we merit, why should we deserve to get to Rabbeinu Zalsian, which is the greatest achievement ever possible, anytime? The answer is that we are a tail. The word tail in Yiddish is a very insulting remark. You won't even mention that word. You want to speak about someone, a very low, degrading, derogatory term, use that word, Yiddish word for tail. A word worse than a shlub or a shlump. Worse than that, starts with a shin also. And yet, that word tail, being the tail of a lion, is still part of a lion. There's no way you can separate the two. And if you start with that tail, step on a lion's tail, you're going to have to deal with the lion's mane, the lion's crown, the lion's self. Whereas if you step on the head of a cat, or a fox, or a roach, so all you got is just that. That's the best he can do. What is that compared to a lion? In this case, you have a fox, very wise animal. Wisdom galore. The head of a fox is surely wiser than the tail of a lion. And yet it's still only the head of a fox. There's no royalty to it. It's not a leader. In fact, it's hounded. A fox is hounded. There are hounds who chase a fox. So the heads, these great heads, geniuses, are still heads of foxes. No matter what they are, as great as they are, it is better to be part of a lion. And therefore, the tzaddikim and the tiyim, in each day, the Nosson said, only, truly, those who are attached to Rabbeinu Zal. Those are the tzaddikim and the tiyim of each day. And here we can understand it, what Rabbeinu Zal said, that even those who cling to the Talmidim of future generations, cling to those Talmidim, will also be helped. There you have clear proof that the lion will help anybody, anyone attached to him. So it's better off for those who are zecher to have this emunah shlema in the tzadik emes. You need no greater proof than the realization, the experience of getting to Rabbeinu Zalsian, or getting to Rabbeinu Zal's yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. While others wander off to see the sights elsewhere, those close to Rabbeinu Zal go to the yeshiva in Yerushalmi, Rabbeinu Zal's yeshiva, they go to Rabbeinu Zal's Talmidim, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, because they are closely, truly attached to Rabbeinu Zal. Ashrei to those who have this emunah shlema. Rabbeinu Zal said he dedicated himself to helping others. This means he must deal with the public. And yet, there was a certain shyness about Rabbeinu Zal of being seen or doing things in public that he abstained from. Whenever he did anything in public, he found it extremely difficult. It was very difficult for him. For example, to recite anything, to say, to be about tefillah, to be a chazan for the Amid. Rabbeinu Zal refused to do that at any time. To be about Torah, to read the Torah. That's reciting publicly. Or even about Makri, so simple as to announce the Kodesh of the Shofar. holiest day, the Menachem says Rosh Hashanah. It's his day. The most important thing then is the blowing of the shofar. Blowing of the shofar has to have a Talmud Chacham. The Rebbe announces the Kodesh, so there can be no confusion, no question of which Kodesh goes, whether it was done properly, whether it should be blown over again. You have the Rebbe, the dog, who recites that. Simple few words announcing whether it's Tekiah, Shvarim Teruah, or Shvarim alone, Teruah alone. This slight action, being Bar Makli, Rabbi Arizal abstained from that too because it meant performing in public. Even when it came time for the yahrzeit, his mother, tzadikis, came time just to say Kaddish in public, Rabbi Arizal found that it was so taxing, so trying, it was an extreme difficulty he was able to do it. The only thing that he did in public was to make Kiddush for the Elam, to say the Kiddush that he makes of the Elam, and to say Torah, to give a shear. It's the only thing that he did in public. This, he did it with the utmost difficulty, the utmost self-sacrifice, the utmost energy expended to perform these things. Otherwise, he would refrain from any other item of public action. Arizal's Torah, of course, as we mentioned previously, was such depth that it contained all the wisdom that existed. Every Torah, we said, contains all of the Torah Shviksav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. At that time, there were Baalei Machlokes, those who tried to rise up against Rabbi Arizal, as is the case in all generations. The Satan, the Baal Dover, tries to create dissension even among tzaddikim to hide the light of the greatest tzaddik. As we mentioned many times, Moshe Rabbeinu was surely the greatest tzaddik, unquestionably, and yet there were great wise men. Korach b'keach hoya. Korach, the Gemara itself testifies to the fact that Korach was a wise person, shrewd, extremely clever. And yet he too was misled to go and do battle, to rebel against Moshe Rabbeinu. How could a person who's wise do that? Well, this is the work of the Satan, who devotes himself entirely to hide, to black out the greatness, the light of the tzaddik emes. In all generations that way too, you find the case of Yosef HaTzadik, who was surely the greatest of all the tzaddikim, men of his brothers. And these tzaddikim were all holy tribes, Shiftei Koch, Shiftei Yud-Kei, tribes of Hashem. And they were blinded, misled, and led to do battle against Yosef HaTzadik. Shaul HaMelech, who was so great a tzaddik, he never committed a sin. When he passed away, he was as pure as when he was born. And yet he too, in one case, was misled to do battle against David HaMelech, led to believe that there was something wrong, that he was doing battle against something that was wrong, chas v'shalom, because this is the work of the Satan. The Satan is so powerful, he could penetrate into the hearts of the greatest and mislead them just to get the light of the tzaddik emes hidden. So naturally, in the case of the tzaddik emes, in the case of Rabbi Arizal, were very many machlokes. People, great people, who rebelled against Rabbi Arizal, who tried to hide his great light, who tried to minimize his greatness, and a lot of things were said in those days. There was a long series of machlokes. Rabbi Arizal once spoke about one item that people tried to show that Rabbi Arizal's Torah was very great, very holy, but it was not his own, chas v'shalom. He had taken it from someone else. They said, we admit that his words of Torah are very high, very heavenly, but he shouldn't be given the credit for it, because he took it from someone else. From where? He inherited it from his grandfather. Rabbi Arizal's grandfather was Rabbi Nachman Horidenker Zal. Nachman Horidenker Zal was one of the closest Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov. He was a Kodesh, very holy tzadik. In fact, his tzion today is in Tveria. Very few who have seen it have gotten to it. Tveria, the old cemetery near Rabat and Kaliska, the other great tzaddik in the special old cemetery in Tveria. He was so great that the story is brought in the Shvachim Baal Shem Tov. He was so great, direct descendant of David HaMelech, just as the Baal Shem Tov was, but he was on the Duchra, male side, and he's so great that when it came to a question of marriage, a shidduch between himself and the Baal Shem Tov as Mechutana, Baal Shem Tov was his Rebbe Mufar. There was a question whether the shidduch could be consummated, because he was a greater yichus than the Baal Shem Tov. Nachman Zohar. The rest of the story doesn't matter. This is just a sign to show how great he was. He was one of the closest Talmidim of the Baal Shem HaKodesh. This was Rabbi Nazal's grandfather. People said, I guess Rabbi Nazal said, Rabbi Nazal inherited his Torah, the Kutim from his grandfather. It wasn't his own words. He simply repeated what he learned from his grandfather. Rabbi Nazal mocked these people and derided them for such foolish remarks. Thus he said, surely the words that I say today are contemporary. They are of present day. A person looking into the words that I say will find they affect those around me. They're directed at my Talmidim. Many times we find Rabbi Nazal's words in the Torah, things that pertain to items that occurred at that moment. For example, you will have the case of, we just mentioned recently, the Torah was dealt with the Istalkus of Rabbi Yitzchak Zal. And that surely couldn't have been said by his grandfather, because there was nothing of that kind that happened in the past. Secondly, Rabbi Nazal said, how foolish are these statements, because if they were from his grandfather, and why weren't some of these phrases, terms, words, thoughts mentioned before, previously? They were never said, nothing similar was said by his grandfather, so how could it have been from his grandfather? He would have kept it a secret completely from the world. It would have come out, some of those words would have come out. So therefore, obviously, this is all very foolish statements by them. Secondly, Rabbi Nachman said, I assure you that if my grandfather, this great tzaddik, Menachem Mendel would be here today, my grandfather, Menachem Mendel, would hear my words, he would stand in amazement, astounded, amazed at the depth of my words. To him, they'd be the greatest chidushim possible, more than his mind could ever take. This was said, of course, modestly, but in truth. The fact that Arizal was so much greater than the tzaddikim of the past. And this is without exception. Tzaddikim of the past generations were as great as they were. Arizal surpassed them in greatness, in wisdom, in depth, in holiness, that all these statements were extremely foolish statements, trying to belittle the tzaddik emes, but they only showed the evil and the stupidity of those who made these statements. The thing is also, too, there is a hint in the Gemara about this machlekes. The Gemara itself foretells that emes, hidden words, about the fact that the machlekes in later generations between the tzaddik emes and his antagonists. The Gemara says that one of the great leading rabbis of the Gemara, his name was Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, of course, being one of the rabbis of the Gemara, had machlekes too. Machlekes in different types of halachas. For instance, you have machlekes in Rav and Shmuel. The Gemara says that we are directed to paskin, to decide like a Rav, whenever it comes to Isur, questions of kashrus, questions of things that are permissible or not, unlike Shmuel, when it comes to matters, court matters, money matters. In the case of Rav Nachman, the Gemara says, the wording in the Gemara is, Hilchasot Rav Nachman B'dini. Law is like Rav Nachman when it comes to Dini. Dini means court cases. But the word Dini, the Aramaic word Dini means machlekes. When there is machlekes against Rav Nachman, the Gemara says, Hilchasot Rav Nachman. No, the law remains like Rav Nachman. He is the one that is right. He is the victor. No, he's machlekes. Arizal said the Gemara referred this, the Remes to himself. Hilchasot Rav Nachman B'dini. He'll be machlekes against the tzadik emes, against Arizal. The law, final word, the final decision in heaven, handed down is laws like Rav Nachman, Arizal, B'dini, and any machlekes there is. To make this a chavruta, the Gemara also uses a term later on where it says, well, prior to this, the Gemara says that Hilchasot Rav Nachman, Halacha Rav Nachman, twice, referring to certain debates in the Gemara, and then Halacha Nachmani, Hilchasot Nachmani. Nachmani was Abaye. Abaye was the adopted son of Rabbi Bar Nachmani, but his real name was Nachmani, so his name was changed to Abaye, as we explained once, because he shouldn't mention his father's name. Rabbi's father's name was Nachmani, so he couldn't call Abaye by his father's name. He called him Abaye, where Abaye means Obi, Hinta is his father. But the wording of the Gemara is, Allah Rav Nachman, Allah Rav Nachman, Hilchasot Nachmani. The thing is like Rav Nachman, again like Rav Nachman twice, top it off, Nachmani also contains Arizal's name. With the Yud is the Chachma, wisdom, the crown. So this seals the fact that if ever there's machlekes, if ever there's question, if ever there's doubt, if ever there is dissension, if ever there is disunity, argument of any kind, know that the din is the final word, the ruling is like Rabbi Arizal, he is the tzadik emes, his word is chai v'kayam la'ad netzach. His word is netzach forever, eternally, because Rabbi Arizal's name is B'nati Netzach, which means victory, it means eternal, eternity. Then also too, that you cannot belittle this machlekes. It's not that simple. You have even the biggest tzadik, one of the biggest tzadikim who have machlekes against them, they are in very grave danger. They just can't close their eyes to it, because when there is machlekes, it causes extreme danger for that person. He becomes weakened, and different forces of evil can actually harm him. So, what is the main harm that comes to that person against whom there is machlekes? He falls into certain bad taivas. Ordinarily, he could be strong against these taivas. Then when machlekes comes upon him, they weaken his immunity, his defenses. He becomes susceptible, and he falls into these taivas to a small degree, to whatever degree, but it's very unhealthy. So, therefore, these tzaddikim are in grave danger. Menachem gives us a mashal as an example. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, we learned it recently too, that Shlomo Melech was mistalik. The Sanhedrin, the rabbis of the Gemara, who learned the Gemara, said that every Jew has a part in Elam Haba and Gan Eden. There are exceptions. There are certain kings who have no part in Gan Eden. And they wanted to list Shlomo Melech as one of those kings. They were chaylik against him, to such extent that King Solomon himself lost his Gan Eden. Period. He's one of those who did not get Gan Eden. The Gemara says that David HaMelech rose up at the heavenly court, and he had to argue with them, and he had to defend, to battle for his son, Shlomo Melech. It was a very long, serious battle until he finally won. he finally won out on his battle, but we see that through the machlekes against Shlomo Melech, he became so weakened that it was difficult for him to defend himself. As great as he was, Shlomo Melech Shasholem Shaloi, the word Shlomo Melech means showing. Moshe, he had a teach of Moshe Rabbeinu, yet because of this machlekes he became so weakened that he could not defend himself completely. It was only with the assistance, with the forceful assistance of David Melech, that he was rescued. That's how one who has machlekes against him is in sakona, in danger. Only real defense against the Baalei machlekes is when a person has true Yerushalmi. He has sincere fear of Hashem, respect for Hashem's words. That is the only thing that can stand up against defense against Baalei machlekes. When a person has machlekes, he must know then, be careful of committing sins. Because sins means the absence of Yerushalmi. Be careful of taivas, be careful of avedus. Strengthen yourself with Yerushalmi, and be able then to stand against all Baalei machlekes. Arizal said, revealed something very controversial, and which especially affects those close to the tzadik emes. Sometimes there's a problem, the person has a problem as to whether he should perform a mitzvah or not if there is a lot of difficulty involved, if there are obstacles that seem insurmountable, if there is opposition whereby it could cause so much friction that it would embitter his life. What is he supposed to do? Simplest case, of course, is if you have the opportunity to ask advice of the tzadik emes. Ask the tzadik emes, there's a mitzvah that I'm supposed to perform. I have not been to Eretz Yisrael yet. Now, that mitzvah is so great, Arizal said a person cannot be classified as the Ish Yisraeli, as a real Jew, until he has taken those 4 steps in Eretz Yisrael. But I have financial difficulties at home, family difficulties, health difficulties. There would be such repercussions. I could lose a job. I could lose. The wife threatens with divorce if I leave the house and go to Eretz Yisrael. I could lose my self-respect in the community. There's danger in general in the trip. Should I make this trip? This is the question posed to the tzadik emes. Arizal says now the question is, what is the tzadik emes supposed to reply to this? The answer is the tzaddik is supposed to, he is forced to tell this person, you're excused. Don't do it. If it requires that much mesiras nefesh, so much self-sacrifice, the tzaddik emes is compelled to say to this person, don't do it. Don't make these sacrifices. Don't give up your job, your home life, peace at home, your health problems. Don't make the sacrifice. Don't do the mitzvah. For example, going to the Arizal Siyum. A lot of sacrifice involved. There are questions involved. There's danger. There are risks involved. Today, not that many, but in the old days, there were actually risks to a person's life. You could get shot going there, chas v'shalom. Other things that could happen. Or in the days of Rabbi Nachman, to go visit Rabbi Nachman himself. If there was difficulty involved, should he make that trip? Rabbi Nachman said the reply, if anybody asks, the answer is no. The answer is no, not I advise you, don't do it. The answer is I order you not to do it. Now, Rabbi Nachman added, this is the explosive statement. When the tzaddik emes says to a person, I order you not to perform this mitzvah, that's itself is a mitzvah. person is being told by the tzadik emes, do not do this item. What is the next step? And also the next step is that this person is not supposed to obey the tzadik emes in this case. We're speaking about the tzadik emes. The tzadik emes says, do not perform this mitzvah with so much mesiras nefesh. You are exempt, you are excused, you are free. You don't have to come to me, you don't have to go to Israel, there's too much self-sacrifice. Does it mean this person now is bound to listen to the tzaddik emes? The answer is no. That person is not required to listen, he's not required to obey, even when ordered by the tzaddik emes. Imagine this case where you may disobey a command by the king. Rosenfeld says this is not a positive statement. It is not certain whether the Arizal made the statement. Because there are those who heard the Arizal say it, they thought they heard it, they were not sure. There is a debate among the Arizal's Talmidim as to what was actually said. No one followed this up to make certain. The debate is that some say if the Arizal says don't do a certain thing, Chas v'shalom, they go against the Arizal's word. He says don't perform this act. The Arizal's command is greater than the act itself. That is the mitzvah now. Don't do it. If you don't, you're performing the mitzvah itself. Mitzvah l'shmei d'vei chacham. One exception only. Greatest act possible, the Arizal said himself. The Arizal testified. Biggest act of a person to perform ever is to come to me for Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is above all else. Nothing compares to Rosh Hashanah. Even I myself, with all my powers, whatever I can do for a person, whatever I can accomplish for a person, there's nothing compared to what I can do for him on Rosh Hashanah. That's higher than anything else. So only then, if the person asks me, should I come for Rosh Hashanah? And I have so much opposition at home, there's so much sacrifice to leave my house for Yontif, should I come? If I tell that person, don't come, then he should not listen. This specific mitzvah is so great, come to me, even if it means true mesiras nefesh, actual self-sacrifice. Don't even listen to the word of the tzaddik emes. So therefore, it would seem to us very clear, would seem, we cannot be the one to judge in this case. We can only warn that I've seen the imminent dangers in this statement. Very dangerous statement. Because there are some people who immediately leap upon the first words and they say they have a license to do anything. And they also do not listen to the tzaddik emes. You don't have to listen to any Rebbe then. Kavachayim, surely so. If a Rebbe says, disobey him. If you think you're doing a mitzvah, listen to nobody. You're a free agent. This is a poisonous concept. Certainly without question, it's not what the Arizal said or ever intended, Chas v'shalom. Because the ikad is mitzvah l'shmei d'vei chachamim. Surely, as R Nosson says, second statement, yesh emen, where Arizal said this refers only to going to the Arizal for the Shoshana. But whatever else, these words, whatever else the tzaddik commands, that must be fulfilled. This was said by the Rosenfeld. The second one, we have a klal, that when two statements are made, it is the second one that is the halacha, in most cases. So in this case, it's very obvious that the dangers existing, emanating from the first statement as such, surely it's the second statement that should be taken as lamaisa. In any event, even if it was the first statement, it gives no person the right to judge for himself what he could do haphazardly without consulting any Rebbe, any advisor, for permission to perform an act that may be dangerous and may be forbidden. Lamaisa, again, would seem that we are not great enough to judge and to destroy the entire basis, the aside of receiving, accepting the words of our superiors, the words of our rabbis, the words of the Gedolim of the former generations. Whatever they say, you must accept. This is the father and mother of the Jews, the Chachamim, tzadikim. Their words must be accepted and taken. Only the question of Hashem itself that we can understand. That's the greatest thing possible. Arizal said, explain this elsewhere, that when a person asks Arizal, I can't come for the Shoshana, Arizal feels very hurt. This Arizal explained in detail. He feels very much hurt. He suffers at the fact this person cannot come, and he feels more hurt that he must say to the person, don't come. But in his heart, he really means come. I cannot tell you to come. I'm telling you don't come, but know that in my mind and heart, I wish you would come. So even in a case like that, he is not disobeying the tzaddik emes, because Arizal himself made clear that his mind and heart was to say, do come, regardless of the sacrifice. This would clarify again the fact that the second is the one that's obviously the right one. We should be zecher to accept every word of the tzaddik emes without question, battle our mind completely, and that's chus, of course. This is what's meant by true bittul to the tzaddik emes and true iskashus. Then I'll say that Rosh Hashanah is the main day of the year. Ikar is Rosh Hashanah, above all else, despite the fact that some say Yom Kippur is greater and so on. Arizal said, by me the biggest is Rosh Hashanah. And if people ask kashas why, so the answer is very good. The answer is you have a kasha. And that's the way it's supposed to be. You're not required to understand everything. If I tell you something, you have a kasha about it, good. You don't understand everything I say, fine. All the better. Except without understanding, you'll have much more credit. I state very emphatically that Rosh Hashanah is the ikar of all, above all else. You get together Rosh Hashanah, and that's why Rav of Breslov, the most important day that exists, the most important yom that exists for getting together is Rosh Hashanah. It's the one time when everyone is mechuyev to make every sacrifice possible, not to allow himself to daven elsewhere, away from the Arizal's minyan, because the Arizal said clearly, wherever you'll be together, no matter where it is, any place, any the furthest corner of the world, I'll be there together with you for Rosh Hashanah. That is Rosh Hashanah. Arizal said too that Erev Rosh Hashanah is also a major point. Erev Rosh Hashanah was so great. It's the last day of the year. It covers the entire year. Arizal stated that my Erev Rosh Hashanah, which is not Yom yet, is far greater than the Rosh Hashanah of all the other tzadikim. I accomplish more Erev Rosh Hashanah than others accomplish on Rosh Hashanah itself. That's why the minhag was in Uman, those who came, those who were zecher to come to Uman, Rosh Hashanah, these past generations, come there, would assemble there, many at great risk. My father Shalom was there for 19 years, in succession, many times risking his life to get there. Many Jews were killed in the process of this journey. He was zecher to get there constantly. He spoke about this great zechus, davening with the minyan, the Arizal's minyan, the Arizal's shul, both days of Shoshana. The custom was, on the Shoshana, of course, you don't go to visit a grave, on Yom Tov. The custom was to go to the Arizal's Syrian Erev Rosh Hashanah, say the 10 Kapitel Tefillin, and Tikuney Zohar. And that's why that day is the most important day of the year, saying the Tikuney Zohar. The most important time ever to get to the Arizal's Syrian is Erev Rosh Hashanah. Because Arizal himself said, Erev Rosh Hashanah, there's a special mitzvah to give a pidyon. Pidyon means to give money to redeem his soul. Can there be a greater pidyon possible than a person coming to Arizal's Syrian and there giving the tzedakah according to Arizal's Savoah? Therefore, the most important day to get the Arizal sin is Erev Rosh Hashanah. You give the tzedakah there, the tzadik, you take an akvali. Then the tefillah said in Oman, the Arizal shul. We should be zecher be emes, and we kusha to the Arizal all our might, and forever afterwards. Be together with the Arizal, Emunah Shleima, and the schus of this Emunah B'Shleimus. We should be zecher to see the coming of Mashiach Tikuney, Binyan Beis Hamikdash, Yeshua Klolius, the entire Klal Yisrael, or Netzach, forever, the schus Netzach, the schus Asayat Emes. Amen. Amen.
We continue the Shir in Sichei Saran, Seif Reish Tes Vav, paragraph 215. Final word about Rosh Hashanah. Arizal said that with me, the main thing is Rosh Hashanah. Main thing means, as far as time is concerned, time means throughout the entire year. Everything that occurs during the year, all these special events, the holidays that are involved, of all of them, the main thing, the central focal point is Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, as soon as Rosh Hashanah is over, as soon as it ends, Arizal says, then I bend over to listen carefully, waiting to hear the sound of the shamus, one who serves, that goes around knocking on doors to awaken people to get up for slichus. Before Rosh Hashanah, they get up for slichus. The custom is, shamus would wake people up in the middle of the night to go to slichus. So as soon as Rosh Hashanah is over, I already am alerted for the sound of the Jews going to daven to slichus, because there is no such thing as time. There is no time. Time flies by like the wink of an eye. The whole life is like the blink of an eye, and surely the year itself. So since there is no time at all, it counts, and the whole year revolves around the focal point, which is Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, all time means nothing. When Rosh Hashanah ends, I wait momentarily for the next Rosh Hashanah to begin. Which means, of course, again, that the main thing is Rosh Hashanah. Arizal said, it is a person to be zecher, to come together, Arizal's minyan, wherever it is, together as a breast of a minyan. That's where Arizal is, and that's where a person receives the greatest possible ticket. Now, in the next paragraph, we enter into, again, a discussion on the dangers of chakira, of philosophy, Rahman al-Islam. You note that the Arizal spoke about this more than any other topic, because it is the exact opposite of emunah, faith. Philosophy and chakira is synonymous with kefira, atheism. Arizal said you must stay away from, as far as possible, from the study or discussions of philosophy. Pointing out to the Al-Shich HaKodesh, Al-Shich HaKodesh was Chaim Vital's first Rebbe. Al-Shich HaKodesh writes about this item, about the dangers of philosophy too, how this chakira, this philosophy, this chakira, has a way, a cunning, conniving, scheming way, how to draw people into it. Because the discussions of philosophy is such that they speak with a very soft tongue, as though they want to help the person truly. They really want to help the person. There's a sweetness about the way they speak, a honey-covered tongue, drawing the person to them magnetically with a desire to really be of assistance. Actually, beneath the surface, there is this poison, this venom, this death-dealing information which can actually destroy a person's neshama, chas v'shalom. Al-Shich HaKodesh says that this is comparable to a zayna, Rahman al-Islam, an illicit woman, a prostitute who made up to lure an unsuspecting victim or a suspecting one, but to lure one who would ordinarily not have thought about this, and to draw him into the worst type of sin possible, Rahman al-Islam, by using the different wiles and tricks that they are endowed with. Menel says that there's also brought the proof. These philosophers bring proof to their theories, to their poisonous theories. Where do they draw their proof from? From psukim, sentences in the Torah. Now, how can they bring proof to their false theories from the Torah? Because the Torah itself, the Gemara says, is called Sam. It is a medicine, but it's two kinds of medicine. It's a Sam Chayim, and a Sam of life, and a Sam of the opposite of life. Depending upon the person who studies the Torah. A tzadik studies the Torah, he derives from it the medicine of life. A Rosha can study the same words of Torah, and who wants to be misled, he can draw from the Torah inference to the opposite of true Emunah. Therefore, these Abikursim, these Mechakim, these philosophers, use the Torah Kedusha as their base, on which to lure victims, those who mean well, who are naive, and by leading them on with words of Torah, they think they're being drawn into what is good and what is holy. Instead, they're being dragged down to an abyss, to a pit, a bottomless pit of tumah and kefira, Rahman al-Islam. Therefore, Rabbi Nachman says it is useless, it is futile to discuss faith with them, with these philosophers. There is no use speaking to them. You can never sway them. Therefore, the only advice is, stay away from these philosophers. Stay away from their writings, because you can never convince them, you can never persuade them to leave their false beliefs. You can only be harmed, chas v'shalom. As was mentioned many times, they study reading their books, no matter who wrote them, even if written by great abonim of the past. It is absolutely forbidden to read those books on philosophy. They are called a one-way ticket to Gehenna, point of no return. Menel said too, was brought one of their statements of philosophy. Of course, we prefer not to repeat their words, but this is one that is brought by the Arizal, quotes them, for a purpose, a very clear purpose, to show how false they are. They base their premise, the false premise, on a posek in the Torah which says, "V'yadata hayom v'hashivei selavecha ki Hashem holikem." You shall know today, you should know that Hashem is Hashem. They say from there, it shows proof that you have to know Hashem, which means you have to delve into study to find out, to learn about Hashem, to get to know Hashem. It says with faith, if you had dat to hayim, you should know. It doesn't say you should believe, it says you should know. This is what they base it on. Menel says how false and foolish, idiotic that statement is. The truth is completely the opposite. Because a person is supposed to know Hashem, yes. How could you know Hashem? Could a person really know Hashem? Is it possible for a physical being to know Hashem who is infinite? Can a person have a grasping knowledge of something which is infinite and safe? That which is far above human conception. To know Hashem means through emunah. The answer is the wording here means know of Hashem through emunah. R Nosson on the Kutei Halachos writes about this, gives a mashal. For example, a king issues a decree, an order, that every person in his kingdom should know there is a ruler over him. There is a monarch whose orders they must obey. Know that there is a ruler over you. That's all. You don't have to see him, you just have to know about the fact that he is there. The same thing too, each person should review this constantly. Da es Hashem. There's a posek which is actually das Hashem. Know Hashem. Know means to know of Hashem every day. Be aware of the fact that Hashem exists. Review this constantly in your mind. How? Know Hashem through emunah. A person must remind himself always that he's Tikuney Zohar. Tikuney Zohar means a memory to remind oneself that Hashem is the creator, that there is a tachlis, there is a goal, there is an olam haba, there is chavi enish, there is reward and punishment, and that there is hashgacha prati. Hashem sees all that is going on. Know of this only through emunah. If your emunah is solid, that means you know of Hashem, this will give you an immunity against sin. A person is aware of the existence of Hashem. If his emunah is strong, then he will avoid falling into a pitfall of the Yetzer Hara and sin. He will be rescued from the Yetzer Hara, from Titus, and this will give him a protection throughout life. But this knowing of Hashem is possible only through emunah. The greatest protection, the shield that one can have against all evil is through emunah. A person who has emunah is one who knows of Hashem. This is what the posek means, and of course, any other statements to delve into chakir, study physically, chas v'shalom, logically, to go into logic about Hashem is the greatest disrespect, the greatest arrogance, and the greatest poisonous act a person can commit. So no matter who that philosopher is, who interprets the word meaning that, can only lead a person to his doom. A person should avoid that and know that he should live his life with emunah. Fulfill the Torah with emunah. The entire Torah is based purely upon emunah. All the commands of Hashem are based on emunah. As the posek says, Kol mitzvot secher emunah. All mitzvot of Hashem are what? Emunah, faith, belief. You cannot fulfill the command of Hashem because you can never fulfill really that which Hashem wants. Which person can rise to that height? Because Hashem says, I know you're not big enough to perform it. All I ask of you is that which you could do, and that is emunah, do it with faith. Give it all the faith you have, then it's considered as though you actually fulfill the command of Hashem. Arizal mocked, derided, in this case, I mean a scientist. You know, held the scientists in very, very low esteem. Scientists then, this of course dates back to close to 200 years ago, scientists who claimed they have delved into their study of science with their instruments, with their advanced knowledge. They claim that there is a civilization on the moon. There is civilized life, not necessarily human, but there is vegetation. There are living things on the moon just as there is on the planet Earth. Because they had developed powerful telescopes, they were able to see what seemed like trees, other living things existing on the moon. Benedel said it was very stupid of their part to say this. It shows how little these scientists know. Because what they see that seems to resemble trees, vegetation, or civilization is simply a mirror. The moon's surface is like a mirror. Looking at the moon from a distance, what you see there is a mirror reflection of the earth. Therefore, they saw that which was reflecting the earth itself. They got the images of civilization or life. The fact is that they speak very foolishly, they utter words of worthlessness, and the fact is that there is nothing of anything like on earth, nothing on the moon that resembles anything on earth. There is absolutely no life of any kind, either animal life, human life, of course not, no animal life, leave any kind of vegetation on the moon. This was the Arizal statement. Notice, as we said, this was said close to 200 years ago. The Arizal made this statement without the use of any telescope, without the use of any satellites, and so on, without spaceships of any kind, just with the knowledge that tzadik has. Since the Arizal was great enough to know what was doing in heaven, in the heavens, in the upper heavens, which are infinitely further and deeper, and much greater than anything in this, our sphere, our universe. So of course the moon itself, the planet the moon, is nothing as far as knowing what it's like. Arizal knew the moon simply and easily. You know, it says about Shmuel, who knew the planetary solar system as clearly as he knew the streets around the house where he lived, in his own community. Arizal said then something which scientists knew nothing about. He stated simply that scientists were wrong. The same thing, though, would hold true today. Compared to what scientists know today, what they think they know, surely it is nothing compared to Arizal. If scientists claim that they took one small step on the moon, or a few small steps, then that's just those few small steps. Arizal knew everything about the moon there is to know, the physical aspect completely through and through, plus of course the spiritual aspect too. So that today also, Arizal, deriding the scientists, would definitely be pointed at today's scientists also. Today's scientists who think they have advanced to a point where they now know what the moon is, so of course again, Hevel Yiftzeh Pihem, they speak air, nothingness. They know nothing about the moon, nothing about what is going above this earth, because they really know nothing about this earth either. This planet Earth too is Tela al Balimor. It also is suspended. It hangs by a thread. What holds this planet up? A mysterious magnetic force? What is that magnetic force? Someone stands outside the earth with a big horseshoe? What keeps this planet suspended in midair, balanced on nothing? Something which is this heavy. The planet is pretty heavy. It's too heavy for one to carry on his shoulders. So the scientists, in truth, know absolutely nothing about the earth itself, and surely cannot advance to a height knowing about the moon and so forth. The Arizal says that as much as they know, that if they do know, they would know only about the physical aspect, which is the tiniest drop compared to the ruchnius. What keeps this world going? Just as a person has an neshama, without that the person is dead, so too there is something spiritual that keeps this world in existence, that keeps the world moving, that keeps everything revolving. Not the earth itself, the earth is stationary. It keeps the functions of this earth revolving. You have night and day, you have seasons, you have the sun and the moon revolving around the earth. All the items that take place, I'm reluctant to use the word nature, because nature actually is still an act of Hashem. Nature, Teva Matli Kim. Teva, word nature, is the Matli Hashem Kim, which means that Hashem is the one that conducts the natural aspects, natural functions of this planet, this earth too, as well as naturally the rest of creation. So of this, the scientists know nothing because they are kafir. They are atheists. They do not believe in a heavenly being, a creator that creates, conducts as mashkiach, supervises everything that happens. They have very false notions about creation itself, about evolution, about the age of the earth. All that is sheer kafira, atheism, which leads them to eternal Gehenna for their disbelief. So that when we speak about the moon today also, we must say very emphatically that the scientists who think that they have solved the riddle of the moon, they know what the moon is, the fact is they know nothing. They know nothing, they have learned nothing, and they will never know anything about it. All they can get to, they only reach their final goal is to reach their grave as far as they can go. If they go beyond that, they will never have gained anything, because all their studies and all their learning is based on kefira, against belief in Hashem, which means self-destruction. As far as the moon is concerned, the words of Rabbi Arizal apply to all times. For all time, the moon, as Rabbi Arizal said, is a barren area, barren of any type of life. There is no question. It requires no further study of anyone to see whether there is life on the moon of any kind. There cannot be found life, because Rabbi Arizal, who knows the moon, said there isn't any. But note that he said this hundreds of years ago, nearly 200 years ago, before there were any kind of spaceships or other kind of orbiting processes and reaching outer space. So that any information that we have contrary to Rabbi Arizal's word must be false. Rabbi Arizal's word is the only one that is true, the word of the tzadik. Now, for that reason, because of the fact that Rabbi Arizal said this so strongly about the falseness of scientists in reference to the moon, we try to avoid this topic, but for the sake of posterity, we would like to state as a personal opinion, which very rarely ever injected. And of course, why go out on a limb to state something personal? Still, it's personal reasons. In other words, I would like to have this recorded on my own record. Satisfied with this, as the Gemara says, it's worth being called a fool, even as long as it strengthens your emunah. My own personal belief, solid belief, emunah, is that the scientists know nothing about the moon. As far as having touched the moon, there are grave doubts in general. As far as I'm concerned, no non-Jewish hand or foot or small step could have touched the Levana, which itself is a symbol of Kedusha. The Levana, the moon, is the symbol of the Shekhinah. It stands for the Shekhinah. It is the key to Kedusha of the Jews. It is also synonymous with the Jewish people. The rise and decline of the moon's surface, the area that is visible, and the fact that the moon stands for, Levana stands for the word Lamed Beis and Sivas Chachma, which is the beginning of a degree of Chachma. It is Malchus, which means Emunah, but from which begins the degree of Chachma. Things that are that sacred, and that holy, and that heavenly, cannot be touched by the tumah of these scientists, Mechakim, Goyim, or whoever they are. Therefore, regardless of what others say, regardless of what so-called scientific tummy proof they bring, I feel that never will a non-Jew or any Mechakim, any atheist, ever be able to touch the moon at all. This I believe implicitly. Regardless of what criticism may be voiced, plus the fact, of course, that we speak about the moon, or say Kiddush Levana, we speak of the moon as something that is ineffable, cannot be touched, cannot be reached. And so it will remain until Mashiach comes, when these stars, any moon too is one of the stars, will strike down all the enemies of the Jews, as well as the Kafrim, the Apikurim, the non-believers who have desecrated its Kedusha. The Divrei Elikim Chayim, the words of Hashem, are one. The emes is one. Divrei Elikim Chayim, nothing else says that Rosh Hashanah Echad. The words of Hashem are one. One is the truth. The truth is only by Hashem. and by tzadik and netiv. Everything else is false, and we follow the truth exclusively. The emunah shlema. Arizal, the last years of his life, suffered from tuberculosis, R Nosson, lung illness. He went to the city of Lemberg allegedly for the sake of cure. Allegedly. If that was not his purpose, he went there for a much higher reason. He came back the last 2 years of his life when he was suffering. He devoted his time and his effort, most of his discussions, to strengthen the hearts and minds of his Talmidim and to destroy the element of Hakira, philosophy. His favorite saying was, Ashreinu, how fortunate we are that we received the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the agent that got the Torah from Hashem, delivered it to us. And the Torah begins with the words, Bereshis Borolikim, which means very simple faith. No philosophy. In the beginning, Hashem created the heavens and the earth, and that's it. No question about evolution or how or what. Simply, Hashem created the heavens and the earth. You go on from there. This is what's meant by true emunah. Arizal stressed constantly that every word of the Torah is emunah. The posek says, Kol mitzvaysecha emunah. Every word of the Torah is mitzvah of Hashem, and every mitzvah is based upon emunah. The truth is emunah and nothing else. A person can live with the Torah by simply having emunah in every word of the Torah. I believe every word of the Torah is the word of Hashem. That is the esteemed of our emunah. Because once we have that emunah solidly, a person can never be swayed by a philosopher. Whatever anyone else says contrary to the Torah, we know that that is false. The Torah is the word of Hashem. Hashem's word is what rules. Arizal once said, I'll reveal a secret to you. Very sad secret. There'll come a time that apikursis, a very large measure of apikursis of atheism, will cover the world. It will descend from above. It will come from heaven. The Satan himself will bring down this heavy blanket of apikursis over the world. For what purpose? For the sake of nisoyin, to test. Test to weed out the good from the bad. Separate those who are truly loyal to Hashem with true faith and those who are wavering, those who are disloyal. It will be a very difficult battle. And I know that those who are close to me, those who listen to me, listen to my words, those who heed my warning, will remain solidly attached. They will not be shaken by this wave of apikursis. But how pitiful it is, how sad it is to think that how such a small number will have to stand up solidly, bravely, against the whole world that will be filled with philosophy and chakira. Now this, the Rabbeinu said, I'm letting you know in advance. And he saw you in generally a test. It's something which comes to a person without warning. Then it's a test. The person to be told you're now going to have a test of faith, it's not really a test. So the Rabbeinu said, in this case, I'm telling you in advance, there's a test of emunah coming up, despite the fact I'm revealing that there is a test coming up, it'll still be difficult to pass this test. You'll find that the majority of people will fail. It'll be a very serious test. Ashrei to those who remain closely attached, remain solid against the wave of the courses which will fill the world so that you'll find, as we see today, speaking about this generation, we find that even among the most learned, most religious, when there are discourses, discussions about religion and faith, there are constantly quotations coming from philosophers, philosophy books of philosophy written by Goyim or by Jewish philosophers, as though that is part of their education, part of their learning. Islam. That is the poison that seeps into their hearts and creates a havoc among these many victims who are unaware of the fact they have failed the test. The test is to stay away from this philosophy, discussion, or study whatsoever. Have no contact with the people who preach philosophy or discuss it. Have no contact with their writings. Don't study it. Don't read it. Don't try to defeat them in a discussion. You cannot persuade them. You can only lose. The best thing is to keep your mind pure, clear, clean of any knowledge about philosophy. Arizal also mocked what we call the Farmer's Almanac, a special calendar which predicts the weather for the year. The Farmer's Almanac prints a calendar in which they write the weather for the entire year. Storms, rainstorms, snow, cold waves, heat waves, they predict this for periods of time. Arizal mocked them. He said that what is cute about it is that, after all, even if they knew nothing, they should be right half of the time. Law of averages, you say things yes and no, hot or cold, they should be right half of the time. If they knew nothing, they claim they know a lot, how come that they're wrong most of the time? Amazing that they are wrong. They tell you that these days it'll be hot, those days it's cold. These days it'll be sunshine, it's raining. They say it's raining, it'll be sunshine. There is sunshine. Everything that, majority of cases, the opposite of what they say. Because the fact is that it's impossible for them to really predict the weather that far in advance. They can't even predict the weather in the immediate future. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mishana Itim. Hashem changes the time so that you can have sunshine and rain in the same day. You can have cold for a period of time and then warm, a sudden change in temperature. So that there's no way that they can really predict the weather. Now this, of course, was said close to 200 years ago. There were no satellites, weather satellites. There were no instruments. There were no ways of detecting the cloud formations, the winds, and so on. Today, science has advanced tremendously. They now have different types of instruments. They now have knowledge about the cloud formations. They have contact with different cities. They know about what's going on, where the winds are coming from, where storms develop, and so forth. So today, they're not like the old days. Today, they make big mistakes instead of small mistakes. Nowadays, they really put their feet in their mouth every time they predict the weather. We find that if you notice, if you ever try to, people don't bother, but try to write down, when you hear the weather predictions, especially long-range weather predictions for 4 or 5 days in advance, write it down, and then that day comes, people forget, so they figure they must have been right. But you'll find that in most cases, again, majority of cases, they are wrong. They are wrong because of the fact that Arizal says, the weather is an act of Hashem. It is the plan of Hashem. The plan of Hashem is so deep, so far from the human mind, human conception, that the scientists, with all their knowledge, all their instrumentation, cannot understand the plan of Hashem in changing Mishana Itim, changing the weather patterns. Therefore, just as then, today too, Weather Bureau knows very, very little. They themselves are forced to admit it because in more than half of the cases, more than 50%, the Weather Bureau issues a statement. They will say the revised Weather Bureau prediction is revised. Why revised? They must admit themselves that there is something wrong with their previous prediction. They didn't look out of the window and see what's doing clearly. And of course, if they say that the day will be completely sunny, very sunny, no question whatsoever, there is still a precipitation possibility of 10%. Try to define what that means. 10% precipitation possibility. Now that is completely illogical, and this could be stated only to, I hate to say, to morons would accept something like that, a statement like that. Or at least it comes from morons. What we know is that the Arizal's words are chayim v'kayamim. They are alive and they are eternal. What was true then is true to this very day. The Arizal mocked them, the same mockery can be made of their predictions to this day. All their instruments and all their drawings, all their patterns, weather patterns, with the space satellites, and with the knowing about cloud formations, they still know nothing about the plan of Hashem changing the weather and climate in different places and different areas, which is ever changing. No one can ever fathom the will of Hashem. Therefore, it is foolish folly for them to attempt it. But again, it's because of their extreme degree of gaiva. They consider themselves so knowledgeable that they can tell what the weather is. They feel there will come a time when they will not only know what the weather is, but they'll determine what the weather will be too. They will determine what kind of weather there will be. Of course, again, Hevel Yiftzat Pihem, this is all due to the gaiva of Tefillah. Atheists do not believe in Hashem, do not believe in a supreme power that guides and directs everything in this earth, the world itself, the weather in it, everything that occurs in it. Ashrenu that we have this knowledge from Tzadik Emes, strengthen us in true Emunah. He said that Menachem main directive, his attention was given to instilling the highest degree of Emunah in his followers. One time, there was one of his followers who cried about the fact that he had trouble with Emunah. He had confusion in his mind, doubts that would come up. He tried to shake these doubts off, but they gave him a lot of trouble. He suffered with them. He came to Rabbi Nachman crying as to what could he do about it? To strengthen his Emunah, not to be pained by having these skepticism that would flit through his mind. Rabbi Nachman said to this person, in order to strengthen him, that know that this is healthy, because this is one of the purposes, one of the reasons that Hashem created the world. Hashem created the world, everything in it, the human being too, in order that there be this battle between the person and his mind, between Emunah and Kefira. This is the kaviyachal of pleasure in heaven. Hashem sees a person doing battle against the Zohar, against the Satan, against Kefira. Even though the person receives a blow, even though he's weakened sometimes, it is still much better for the person to have this battle and to have no Yetzirah at all, to have no doubts whatsoever, to have no trouble, and be serving Hashem like a robot. This is what Hashem wants, to have a person be created, come to this world, do battle, and to strengthen himself, to fight for Emunah. Posek says, Kol ma'asehu be'emunah. All creation of Hashem, every act of creation by Hashem, was made purely for the sake of Emunah. To have Emunah be the basis, the foundation for all Jews to live by. But you cannot get it that simply. You've got to fight for it, you've got to battle for it. You'll have a lot of opposition, you'll have a lot of obstacles come up, you'll have a lot of people or instances that will inject or attempt to inject doubts. That's for sure. And of course, doubt is the worst item possible. Safek is the opposite of Emunah. Vadai, positiveness is Hashem. Safek, doubt, is the aside of the klipos, tumors, amalek, not the amalek. This is what Hashem created the world for. Everything for the sake of this battle and for the sake of seeing a Jew win out. Therefore, the Arizal strengthened this person and said to him, don't take it so much to heart. You feel that you're suffering because of these doubts, but you're fighting it, good. And know that you're really serving Hashem. That's why Hashem created the world. By taking part in the motive, kaviyachol, the motive, the will of Hashem in the entire creation. And know that if you battle long enough, you must win out in the end. You must be victorious if you do battle. All you have to do is just do battle and you're victorious. This is what the Nosson says. Quoting the Zohar Kodesh, Zohar Kodesh says, Man natzach, man yachas kreva, moni kreva b'yodei. Who is the one that is victorious? He who holds the weapons in his hand. He who holds the sword, the spear in his hand, he is the victor. Nosson asks, how is that a victor? If a soldier holds a sword in his hand, how does that make him a victor? How can he be victorious if he's going out to battle? Soldiers get killed. The answer is this sword is the sword of Emunah. As long as a person fights this battle, just fighting it alone, he must win. This is all that Hashem asks of a person. Take this sword in your hand, go fearlessly into battle. You go into battle, I'll be with you. If you are cowardly and stand back and refuse to do battle, you must be destroyed. But if you hold a sword in your hand, pick up the sword, go into battle against the Yitzhahara, against the Satan, against the Kofrim, against the Apikursim, the Chakrim, just by taking the sword into your hand, you have already won the battle because then Hashem is with you. Once you take up the sword in your hand, you have done your task. Fight this battle, Hashem guarantees you victory. So, Manotzach, who is the victor? He who holds a sword in his hand. Because that's his requirement for battle, nothing more. Victory is yours because Hashem will see to it that you win out. Therefore, the Menachem said that since that's the ikar purpose of creation, ikar is for a Jew to do battle against kfida. That's all that's necessary to strengthen himself in Emunah, and he's sure to win out. And as I went a step further, he said that as far as the lack of Emunah is concerned, as far as Chakida, philosophy is concerned, and we have cases of great Jewish philosophers, or great Jewish authors, or great Talmidei Chachamim of the past, who wrote commentaries on the Torah Kedusha, but using philosophy as a base. And said those Mefarshim, those commentaries, are not to be looked at, not to be studied, not to be learned at all. Even though they were great Talmidei Chachamim, they were leading luminaries of the Jews in those days, still as long as they based their writings on philosophy too, everything they said is not to be studied. Now, in that case then, what should a person do if he wants to learn Chumash? He wants to learn Tanakh. He wants to learn Gemara. If we're going to ban many of those Mefarshim, what should a person study? Ben Arizal said, how fortunate we are that we have Rashi HaKodesh. Rashi HaKodesh is the greatest commentary and the most accepted commentary, both on Teresh B'Ksav and Teresh B'Alpeh, the Chumash, the Navi, and the Gemara. Because Rashi HaKodesh has nothing to do with any kind of philosophy. He goes directly according to the pure, true path of Emunah and the Torah Kedusha itself. And therefore, a person can actually live with Rashi HaKodesh alone, if necessary, as a commentary. Of course, you have other Mefarshim who are not commentaries. They are Mefarshim who delve, the Achreinim who go into Pilpul. That's not considered commentaries. Commentaries, they explain Pshat, those are the ones that are dangerous. And there, Rashi HaKodesh alone is enough. On Chumash, on Navi, you have a lot of Mefarshim that should be avoided because they use philosophy as a key to explain the stories in the Torah, the logic, chas v'shalom, according to philosophy. Therefore, it is enough if we have Rashi Kodesh alone. Same thing too with Chumash and Navi, and in Gemara also we use Rashi Kodesh as the key. Rashi Kodesh is, calls Rashi Kodesh the brother of the Torah. He goes together with Torah so closely that they are inseparable. A person cannot learn Torah without Rashi Kodesh. That's why it's important that whenever we speak of Rashi Kodesh, we use the word Rashi HaKodesh. Always add the word HaKodesh because his writings were pure Ruach HaKodesh. The proof is that every person, the smallest child, begins to learn Torah, Chumash, Navi, Gemara. The eldest all learn Torah with Rashi HaKodesh. This we see proof of the greatness of Arizal. That's why a person has what to learn Torah with. Avoid even the Gedolim who wrote with philosophy. Avoid their writings. Stay only on the path that is pure and emunah. We should be zecher to accept the words of the Torah Kedosha with simplicity, pshitus, emunah. Follow the words of Rabbi Arizal. Stand strong, stand fast against any of the opposition and the ways that the courses that come out now, and the schus of this emunah. And also that those few who remain solidly will be able